Today, I'd like to discuss the concept of aging well, which in my mind is often misunderstood and actually not properly addressed. Most of the advice out there isn't really about aging well, but it's much more about staying young for as long as possible. Right? So many of the products and the services sold to us are about preserving youth. Facial cream to prevent wrinkles, or hair dye to cover up grey hair. And I won't even get into the more invasive procedures to keep our skin elastic. So all of these are really about preserving youth. And ironically, those of us who are able to mask signs of aging are rewarded by society. Right? Your friends and family might come and say, "You look fantastic, you look like you're just in your 20s or 30s. You haven't changed a bit." Now, it sounds like a compliment, and it probably is, but it also quietly reinforces the idea that aging well means not looking older, right? And that staying young is the goal. And I don't think that this is a particularly respectful way to address the healthy aging process, nor is it a very sustainable approach in a longevity society where life expectancy continues to rise and many people are getting older. Right? Eventually, signs of aging will show physically, cognitively, emotionally, socially, no matter how well we are able to preserve our youthful appearance. So what we need is a shift in mindset, right? Away from preserving youth to embracing change so that we can begin to see the positive aspects of aging. I'm Dr. Gabi Pfeiffer, psychologist with a background of aging research for over a decade. And in this video, I'd like to explore how our current concept of aging well, which often just means staying young, might benefit from a real meaningful update, right? One that truly recognizes the strengths that come with growing older. So I think two things need to happen. One, acceptance. Accepting that changes across the lifespan are inevitable, and then embracing both sides of those changes, right? The positives as well as the slightly more negative ones. And second, a reframing process. And this entails identifying the emerging positive aspects as we move through life and grow older. Right? So currently we're very quick to point to the declining aspects as a result of comparing ourselves to our former selves, right? I used to have smooth skin, rosy cheeks, and so much energy. So these might be physical comparisons, but we also have cognitive comparisons. I used to be much quicker to grasp and learn new concepts, and my memory used to be sharp, and I didn't have those tip-of-tongue experiences where I can't seem to be able to find words as I used to be able to. And as long as we focus on the declining aspects, using young adulthood as an anchor point, we stay stuck in a mindset of scarcity. And we treat aging well as the absence of decline, instead of recognizing the value in what is newly unfolding and emerging. Right? So it's absolutely essential that we begin developing a vocabulary that captures the positive aspects of aging. Because without this, we just keep reinforcing the one-sided narrative of decline. And I would say most people struggle actually to articulate the benefits that come with growing older. Not because they don't exist, but because we just haven't equipped ourselves with the language to recognize and express them. And then we also need to start recognizing the less positive aspects associated with youth, right? Because there is a duality. With every positive comes something negative, and all apparent negatives have something positive. So at the moment, it appears as if we're quick to define the strengths that we possess in youth, and we're also quick to define sort of the aspects in transition that we're seeing with increasing age. But then we forget to point out the opposites in each age group. And I think in the reframing process, we would be well advised to actually fill those gaps, right? And identify aspects in transition in young adults while also highlighting the sort of stronger points or the developed aspects in older adults. So let me give you a more concrete example. Often when we think in terms of the strengths in younger adults, what comes to mind is their increased physical and cognitive agility. And these are also the qualities that we fear losing with age, so we're quick to point to a declining physical and cognitive agility in older adults. But what are the areas of development in youth, or the aspects that are still in transition in younger adults? Well, here we often think of young adults having less experience relative to older adults, right? And this can refer to less life experience, professional experience, as well as educational experience. And this has consequences. With less experience, you have an increased appetite and a yearning to acquire that experience. And younger adults are also said to gain reward from self-development, focusing on own personal growth, having or maintaining a level of autonomy and independence. And this may lead to more frequent transitions and a greater openness to new opportunities. And generally, we're seeing a more fluid approach to commitments in youth. And if we're now looking at the strengths in older adults, well, in contrast to young adults, they obviously have a wealth of experience, life experience, professional and educational experiences. And here are the consequences that this leads to greater stability. With greater experience, you're open to more long-term commitment. You don't need to move on to gain novel experiences so often. There's also the concept of generativity that surrounds older adults. And this concept comes from Erik Erikson, who was a key developmental psychologist back in the 80s. And he suggested that older adults gain reward from developing others. Now notice the opposition to young adults who gain reward from developing themselves, right? So there is the transition from self-development and personal growth to now, developing other people. Building a legacy by sharing experiences through mentoring and support. Also, older adults serve as a secure anchor, often for younger people, building a foundation and a level of trust. And there is a greater preference for depth over novelty. This can give a greater sense of loyalty and resolve. So sticking things out even when they get complicated, rather than quickly moving on to new opportunities. Now, we need to be careful to not create further stereotypes when engaging in this exercise and start putting age groups in discrete boxes of strengths and areas in transition. Right, there's probably a great level of overlap in strengths and points of development at all ages. And of course, there's a great level of individual preferences, individual perceptions, and individual differences. I do think, however, that by acknowledging both the strengths and aspects in transition, at each life stage, we can adopt a more balanced perspective and recognize that every season brings its own value. So this also shows that we can actually have everything in life, just not at the same time. So we do need to go through those different seasons. And this reframing process invites us to appreciate what we have during our younger years, while looking forward to the emerging positive aspects as we grow older. And also recognizing that, we need to let go of former strengths to make room for something new. So I believe that if we begin to identify the emerging positive values in older age and articulate them frequently, it would lead to a newly acquired appreciation and a respect for older age. A positive language where we're able to communicate the strengths of aging as well as the aspects of transition in youth would actually eventually counter ageism. Because ageism, ironically, is the discrimination of older people rooted in the fear of losing the qualities that we associate with youth. So if we stop comparing ourselves to our younger selves and start highlighting the strengths that come with age, we can actually begin to shift that narrative, right, from one of loss to one of growth and seeing the evolving potential. Now, if this conversation gave you something to think about, feel free to like the video. Also, don't forget to subscribe so that you can be part of an ongoing discussion of what it really means to age well. Thank you for spending this time with me, and until next time, take good care of yourselves.